All right, this is Unit 6, and we're kicking it off with Section 6.1 because 1 is the first number. That's math. So now that we have math out of the way, we can talk about science. It is really a disgusting time in the world of AP European history when we have to delve into the realm of science, which makes me sick at my stomach. For some of you, this is the greatest time. And it is something that we will talk about for 2 sections in this unit, which is even more disgusting and perhaps have connections to even more than that. So I will do my best, and I'm sure some of you all will do your best, but some of you others will enjoy every second of this. In this section, I have many GIFs and moving animation images, and if they don't pop up on YouTube, which I doubt they will, then that is our disadvantage. As such, we will have to move on in our disappointment. Yeah, Mr. White. So let's move on and start this thing. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is before science, obviously today, and the way we view it in the 21st century, we have to see what science really was in the Middle Ages, in the medieval times before the Renaissance and the early modern period. And really, when we talk about science and religion today, we can, in many cases, separate those. In some cases, they are intertwined. It depends on your religious faith, but many of them see them mutually exclusive. But in the Middle Ages, it was really not the case. Science was considered a wing of religion, and everything that was explained in a scientific world had some sort of religious context. Let me give you an example. Tree blows over in your yard. Middle Ages teaching, medieval teaching, will say that that tree blew over because God wanted it to be blown over, and therefore God knocked it down. And that's really what you saw. You went through that lens first. Obviously today, you can still kind of apply the religious context to it, but the world can also explain a tree falling down due to a poor root system, poor structure in that root system. Perhaps the wind knocked it over. Perhaps I chopped it down. There are various reasons why, but the tree falls down in the forest. There it is. Superstition, a major role in the life of a Middle Ages person. There were no natural explanations for things. Everything was maybe a superstitious reason. So, you see one of these black cats. You got an umbrella open in your room. You got a little horseshoe. You got Friday the 13th. This is a brilliant picture. You have this oddly decorated bed. You have this scary-looking woman. Really, all of these things represent superstitions, and people were really superstitious in their lives, and they carried that throughout. They also saw, and this is a big key for this unit, the universe in a geocentric view. And let me explain how that works. And I'll kind of go through that, but this geocentric view was proposed first by your your ancient Greek philosophers such as Aristotle, and furthered by Plato and Socrates, mostly Aristotle, in which they saw the earth as a perfect body in the universe being in the center. And people saw really all of natural life being centered on earth. So with that in mind, you can look at through basically the future. I don't know what I'm saying, so I'll just go ahead to the next slide. Alright, so here we are with some fun little drawings. So basically, people did see in terms of the earth as being the center, this kind of pull between heaven and hell, and those kind of notions that heaven being something above and hell being something below really comes out of this period of medieval times. Dante's Inferno, which is one of the more famous pieces of medieval literature, really espoused this belief that the farther down you go into a deeper circle of hell. So here in this drawing, you have Bob Jones here in his kind of normal middle class life. You got the kids over here, but the farther you go down, the worse it gets until you get down here where all the Louisville fans are and, the like, people of that nature. So that idea of heaven up, hell down, that's really a medieval idea, and it is really pushed from that time period. So time goes along. Let's see what we got next. Okay, so time goes along and people see in the Middle Ages really the world being made up of four elements. And you know that periodic table that in chemistry you have to learn, and it's the worst thing in your world and your life. I know how it is. But anyway, a lot easier in the Middle Ages. Medieval students saw four elements in the world: earth, wind, not wind, no wind, not earth, wind, and fire, but earth, water, fire, and air. I don't know how you want to arrange the letters. You can do that on your own time. But in the geocentric model, as I was talking about, the Earth is located at the center of the universe. And then you have these, as it was assumed, these levels of air and fire that basically surrounded the Earth. And then you notice the other planets are orbiting, and I include the moon with that, they are orbiting the Earth. And notice also they are orbiting in perfect circular orbits, just like that circle I drew right there. So, I mean, you have this basically perfected model of the universe, and it's all drawn out of the idea that God is really driving the universe. God is in control, and that perfect God created that perfect universe. It all kind of comes out of that idea. And people really respond and go with that fact. So, basically, this geocentric view, again, very key word, geocentric, is again the idea driving medieval thought. And everything, including the sun, is surrounding and orbiting the earth. Okay, and there were actually biblical justifications. So the Catholic Church, which of course medieval times is the sole arbiter of everything in society, they're actually the one that's going to be driving this thought, and they actually have biblical justification for it. There's a story in the book of Joshua in the Old Testament in which Joshua is marching the Israelites around the city of Jericho, trying to destroy the wall around Jericho and take that city down and take over that city. And Joshua prays to God that God will keep the sun in the air because God had told him, I think I may be roughing up the details a little bit, but God had told him that, hey, as long as the sun is in the sky and you follow my will, then the city's walls will come down. Well, Joshua says, hey, God, can you keep the sun in the sky? And as the verse Joshua 10:13 says, stop sun over Gibeon, halt moon over Ajalon Valley, and sun stopped, moon stood stock still until he defeated his enemies, rendering the idea that the sun and the moon rotated around the earth and moved, and then God was able to stop them. So the idea, again, there's justification for this geocentric idea is that as these things rotate around the earth, first of all, the earth is not moving, and it's in the perfect center of the universe, and the sun, Mercury, moon, and all these things are rotating around. So, obviously, this is really not the model with the way we see the universe today. So the thought was, how does this change occur? What things prompt the change that we see later? Well, first of all, medieval universities, as they started to grow in the later Middle Ages, after the Black Death had subsided, they had started to begin to escape the church's reach, primarily in Northern Europe. You see that first. Italy, not so much, but up north, the people are starting to kind of think outside of biblical ideas. The Renaissance is going to stimulate science by studying the ancient maths and the ancient mathematics. A guy like Pythagoras, who in geometry you're studying his theorem. A squared plus b squared is c squared. I think that's correct. If not, I'm sorry. I apologize for my incorrect math. In any case, the Renaissance is stimulating the idea of going back to the sources, looking up to see how the world is drawn up. And then also we've talked about exploration. And what exploration is doing, and the idea of, hey, I got to go from point A to point B, I got to get all these new resources, and all that with mercantilism we've talked about, where if you don't get it, you lose it. Well, how do you get there? You create instruments to get you from point A to point B and get there as quickly as possible. And to do that, you look into possible scientific ideas to make that happen. So again, it's all connected. This is great. I'm getting emotional because it all fits like a puzzle piece. Oh, it's so great. I'm sorry, I'm kind of trying to generate emotion. That's always a bad idea. All right, moving on. So, because of those ideas that I was getting falsely emotional about, they set up what's called the scientific revolution. Now, this is not like political revolution. It's not something that happens. You can't say, oh, it starts here, like the Reformation. Oh, it starts here, like the French Revolution we'll study later. Scientific revolution, much like the commercial revolution, takes place over the series of years, and in this case, centuries. You could say 300 years. And it's a sweeping change. Sweeping change in scientific views of the universe and advances in math, physics, astronomy, biology, medicine, chemistry, all these things. Your book does a lot, and it goes really in depth in terms of talking about anatomy and how people view the human body differently, different medicines that come out, the way that physics and this idea of gravity that we'll talk about comes out, all these things. But we're really looking at astronomy today and how the Earth is positioned in the universe. And as Neil deGrasse Tyson has shown us in the show Cosmos, that there is a lot out there, and the universe is an exciting and interesting place and should be studied. And the scientific revolution really is going to push that into the first part. So we come to our first significant boy, or man, or girl. I'm not really sure looking at the picture. Anyway, Nicholas Copernicus, a Polish astronomer, a studier of the stars in the years 1473 to 1543, develops a new idea. And it's called the heliocentric view. And it's going to fundamentally change the way people view the universe. And this is an incredible argument that he's making. What Copernicus views, which is this new invention called the telescope, is that he's starting to see perhaps the movement of the stars, and that, for example, different star outlines appear in the sky, which tell Copernicus that maybe the Earth, instead of being standing still in the universe as the geocentric theory proposed, maybe the Earth is moving. And the heliocentric theory states that not the Earth is the center of the universe, but the sun is the center, and the Earth and the planets revolve around the sun. In fact, the sun is the center of the universe. It's an incredible thought, because this directly challenges and contradicts the idea that not only have been held for centuries, but also that the Catholic Church holds. I would point you also to the years that Copernicus is studying. We're talking about the year 30. 13 years later, 1517, Martin Luther nails the 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Cathedral. This is still a time in which suggesting something outside of the Catholic Church's ideas are very dangerous. And it's something that you certainly do not do in Poland, where Copernicus is from. It is a highly Catholic area. It's not something that you come out and do. So Copernicus waits till 1543, the year of his death, to publish his views so that he can escape persecution. Perhaps a cowardly idea, perhaps a cowardly action. You could argue very intelligent as well, to escape that persecution. But in fact, when his ideas were printed, Luther, who was 3 years from his death, and John Calvin, who reigning in Geneva, both criticized and basically derided, I'm not sure if that's a word, but anyway, they basically came out and called Copernicus a Looney Tune. And they went back to the Bible and said, look at this verse, bam, 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 right here, support the medieval view. But again, Copernicus's vision and his willingness to challenge himself on what he'd been taught lit up the sky for him. And as we know today, his ideas are a little bit more realistic than perhaps even the ones before him had. Now, is the sun the center of the universe? Well, go ask your science teacher. But so is Copernicus totally right? Well, maybe not. Who knows? But still, he is really the one that comes out and pushes this huge idea. Wow! Science! Okay? So here we are, heliocentric theory, Ron Burgundy. And basically, sun and stars, sun in the middle, Earth rotating around, notice again, perfectly circular, so the universe retains its perfection in terms of like shapes, geometrically, but again, heliocentric theory saying the sun is in the middle. The easy way to remember this, you're like, what's geo, what's helio? Geocentric, like geography, geology, meaning of the earth at the center. Heliocentric as in helium, meaning, and if you know any science, like I know some science, helium is a leading gas found in the sun along with hydrogen. I think that's right. If not, I'm sorry to my high school and middle school science teachers. But anyway, heliocentric sun. And then, after Copernicus and after his death, there were a few other men who came out and really built and challenged and climbed aboard Copernicus's ideas. The first one to note, his name was Tycho Brahe. And Brahe, there at the right, builds an observatory, later confirms Copernicus's findings, even though he actually came out at first and said that Copernicus's ideas were bad and not correct. He thought that even though he believed at first that the planets still revolved around the sun, but the sun revolved around the earth. So basically you have a setup where here's the earth, here's the sun, and then you have the planets all around the sun, and then they rotate around the earth. And right there. Zoop, right there. So that's Tycho Brahe. You're like, I know what you're asking. What's up with his nose? Is he a vampire? Well, he's not a vampire. Here's the story with Tycho Brahe. He actually got into a duel one time, and in that duel, somebody sliced his nose off with a sword. Pretty cool story. So then he fashioned himself a gold nose and attached it to his shaved off and cut off nose. So he had a golden nose, and it was brass and copper in there. There was many different metals. And it eventually made him sick and he died. But it happens. Sometimes you got to be creative. So anyway, that's Brahe. Bigger dude, bigger news. You probably heard of him before. Johannes Kepler. He was the assistant to Brahe. Some think that when Brahe died, that he was poisoned and that Kepler poisoned him. That's just a rumor. Science. Those crazy guys. But anyway, Kepler is an assistant to Brahe, and he's going to develop ideas of planetary motion. Now, you don't have to know this. One disclaimer I will have for you, and I'll explain this with 6.2, is we do not need to know and be able to explain scientific theories in depth. We do need to know kind of the base knowledge of what they are. So I'm not going to ask you to understand the 3 laws of planetary motion. I will ask you to understand that Kepler comes up with the idea that the orbit of the planets around the sun is of an oval shape and not circular. So really, what does all this mean? Well, this is laying the foundation to some guys we'll talk about in our next section, like Galileo, Isaac Newton, that basically says that the vision, the structure that the Catholic Church and that other institutions had been preaching and teaching for centuries is fundamentally flawed. It is not correct. And perhaps we have to look back again at what they're teaching and other things they're teaching, and perhaps push the notion that a truth can be realized if you have the proof to back it up. That we can look for something to be true, and my dog is going crazy, so let me check on this. I was in my last sermon there. Piper! 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 Get down! Get down! Get down! I'm sorry. Piper was barking at the window. Hey! Come here. Come here. Okay, sorry. I yelled in your ear, probably. And it was very frustrating for you. Anyway, I don't know what I was saying. I will leave you with this. Science is terrible, but it's very cool at the same time.